What's up, everybody? Welcome to Theory Unlocked, another podcast with, of course, another guest. This is Alex. He's from all the way over in Portugal right now, which is something we're going to get into. We're going to be talking about Nightholme today and what that game is all about. There's a lot of questions. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
As always, I'm Drew, and of course, joining me, none other than Michael. Michael, what's up, buddy?
I'm excited. When you told me we had a horror game that we were going to be talking about, I got a little scared. So as you said, I've got some questions for sure, to make sure that I'm not going to be, cowering in fear when I check this game out.
Yes. So let's preface this right off the hop. Alex, your game is a horror game. Michael and I are not horror people whatsoever. But it caught the interest of me, especially off the hook. I thought, wow, damn it, what is this? I gotta check it out. So I reached around, got some connections, hooked you up, and here we are to talk about Nightholme. Why don't you give us a rundown of what the game is and what people will be experiencing during their time?
Mm-hmm. So the game is really kind of a fusion of different genres. It has some extraction elements, but contrary to other extraction games, it is not a shooter. In fact, there are no weapons in the game. It's a third-person action stealth game. And part of what makes it really innovative is the fact that you yourself are the weapon. You transform into various types of archetypes and types of creatures, each with their own kind of core fantasy and powers. And then you kind of are either by yourself or with up to two other friends or allies in the map against other teams or other solo players. And you have various objectives. One of the main objectives that we have in the game is kind of facing off these huge boss characters we call Gloom Fiends. And when you are able to defeat the Gloom Fiend, it kind of drops something we call a Terror Seed. And that Terror Seed is something that you could collect, and you can actually then equip and mutate and kind of combine, and it adds to your build.
Michael, where does this put you at, dude?
I mean, I think I got to start with kind of how I said the intro. When you decided to go with horror, first question is why? You talked about it's a blend of different genres. You talked about the extraction part. What made you decide on the horror part?
Yep, that's a really good question. The core of the game is what made it horror. The transformation mechanic itself. So this idea that you start the game by drinking a potion called Nocturne. And the type of potion determines or elixir determines which archetype you turn into. But the idea is that once you drink it, you've got the power. And there's various stages of transformation. And the game is a lot about decisions and about duality and about imperfect decisions. So where the horror comes in is the fact that you essentially take in poison, and to become powerful, to be able to face the things, you become the things that you are, the very things that you're about to hunt. But in doing so, you risk losing yourself. And so this idea of the transformation being at the core of the game, what better genre than horror to kind of really explore that kind of idea of, delving into the dark side to kind of fight the dark side. And I would say that this goes all the way from the kind of the high level concept genre horror right down to the lowest level of the game design itself. So I'll give you an example. Everything you do when you're transformed costs sanity. Okay, so it's not that you're limited by the power. It's not like you like in a fantasy game you have like this MP bar, and when it drains, well, you're out of power. There's unlimited power. The problem is that in consuming it, you're kind of sacrificing self. And if you sacrifice enough, you kind of risk losing yourself and becoming the very thing that you're hunting. And there's actually a core mechanic in the game where typically in games where you lose your sanity, you game over or something happens. In our game, you actually turn into an abomination creature. And when that happens, you have a very short amount of time to do something to save your soul, to kind of gain your sanity back, which is essentially hunt another player, get its heart, consume it. If you fail to do that, then your character just becomes, you lose it. Like all of a sudden your character is just controlling itself, it goes off, and you're gone. It's like that shot in Get Out when the character kind of gets sunken back into the ground. So it's this idea that then you have this creature in the map hunting other players that used to be a player. So all of these mechanics are literally what kind of decided the genre for us almost.
That's crazy. I like the evolution of the character, especially tipping scale, right? There's a risk reward to using your abilities. How far do you push yourself before it actually turns on you in the essence? Did you play Evolve?
Yes.
Yes, you did. Of course you did. Man, I love that game. So when this is I think the part that kind of hooked me when I saw your game, Alex, was the fact that like, holy shit, that's Evolve. And then you kind of evolutionize yourself into this other creature being. Can you talk about that process of what it was like designing the evolution from one stage into the next?
Yeah, it all came from this concept of imperfect choices. Um, so when we first started, we considered having kind of this linear evolution. So you start as a human, like weak, and then the more you play, because this other innovative concept that we have in the game is that unlike typical extraction games or shooters, for example, where you come into the game with your earned level and gear. In our game, you certainly come in with your gear, and players that play a lot, you can have like better builds. But the actual leveling happens in session, like in a MOBA. And so
Oh.
when we decided on that approach, we started first looking at kind of a linear progression. Well, you start weak, and then you get to level 10 at the end, for example, and you're more powerful. But we realized that having only one axis of evolution, so power, limited the game. It wasn't really kind of pushing us into that kind of those hard choices that we wanted to have in the game. So we kind of envisioned these two stages. One that is less of a transformation, where you're not as powerful, but you have control, which means that you can move silently. You maybe have you can kind of access some abilities, like some archetypes, for example. Werewolf type character might kind of be able to smell low health enemies and even see the smell, like in 3D, or hear other players' hearts through walls. So it gives you access to kind of these creature powers, but it still allows you to be human enough to be able to kind of use strategy and be silent. I mentioned the game has a bit of stealth to it. There is, but it's a systemic kind where you have tools. We let you manipulate the game and the world. And then you can choose the other transformation, which is a full transformation into the archetype that you've chosen. You're super powerful, but you lose all ability to be subtle. So there's like a big red arrow pointing at you. Here I am. So this idea that you can either have control or power. Either, like, both are good depending on the situation, and both can be terribly bad depending on the situation. So it's all about hard choices. The game is about choices.
Man, that's cool. That is cool. I want to talk about the process of getting to where you guys are today. How did the concept even start? Where did you come from? First of all, you came from Montreal, and now you've relocated all the way over into Portugal.
Yep.
What was that process like, and how did you begin to build the team over there?
Yep. So I still remember back in the old days when Montreal wasn't a gaming hub. When it first started, a few companies bet on a city that had this incredible richness and culture, because you had kind of the francophone world and the anglophone world, which were kind of living side by side. I think it formatted people in with this kind of duality, and I think it's a stimulant for creative minds. And I think this is why you have so many strong creatives that come from Montreal. It's the fusion of that diversity of culture.
Sure.
And I remember those days when everybody was kind of hungry. Like we all of a sudden we could make games for a living. It was like, holy crap. And there was an energy that was palpable. Everything was possible, and people were kind of like felt so privileged to kind of be able to kind of do this stuff for a living. Now then it transitioned into this huge hub of companies where, in my opinion, there's too many different studios and for the amount of people that can populate those core teams adequately. So it was becoming for me very difficult to produce games in Montreal because of that competition that was making it kind of, and also jading people. Like, when you always feel that you can be the impression that maybe the grass is greener somewhere else, or that you can be doing a bit better, it doesn't allow you to focus on just enjoying the moment and what you have. So my family and I, we went to Portugal. I was actually born in Portugal, but my parents moved away when I was like 3, so I'm
Yeah.
like very much a Canadian. But we did go to Portugal for vacation sometimes, and I felt this energy in Lisbon that I remember feeling in Montreal back and when the gaming industry was just starting. There was this gaming hub that had just kind of kicked off in Lisbon, like a fledgling game producers association, and it kind of really reminded me of that. And so this is why at one point I figured, you know what, I want to get that feeling again of being part of something that's kind of growing. And then how we built the team, honestly, one person at a time. And
Sure.
we looked for people that had one thing in common: a passion for making games, like that sacred fire, where people that like all they wanted to do was just make cool shit together, make a good game. And you know, sometimes people compare companies to a family. I actually think it's a really bad comparison. I don't think a studio should be a family. Like, first, you can't control who you're as part of your family. You know,
Yeah.
and not everybody pulls their weight, but I think it's more like a village. And a studio is a village. It's a small community where everyone is essential, and everybody is kind of like, everybody's role is critical to making that small community work. And this is the philosophy with which we built the studio. And I don't know exactly how we pulled it off, to be honest. And I don't think, I think there's a lot of luck involved.
Sure.
But uh, we created a bunch of people, like we created a group that feels to me like, when I look at them, it feels like they've known each other for years, when in fact most of them didn't know each other last year. And that's exactly the number one thing that we wanted to create, like this studio where this kind of little bit of a safe haven where people could just like passionately create something that they were genuinely interested in. This game, we chose it because this is the game that we very much wanted to do.
Which is a great
And
starting point. Michael, I'm going to let you go from there, buddy.
you've usually taken this question in the past, Drew, but I'll be the one who takes it, right? A
Sure.
lot of the guys we talk to, their studios all over the place. Are you guys all in Portugal, or is it kind of spread out all over?
All in Portugal. That was one of the things, is that if people wanted to join, they needed to be in Portugal, in Lisbon. And it doesn't mean that people are at the office 5 days a week. I'm a strong proponent of the hybrid approach. I think that there's days in the week where it's good to be at home, and people need to recharge their batteries. Not everybody is an extrovert, so some people need to recharge their batteries. Other people's, even extroverts, sometimes need to just buckle down and, create documents, which is easier to do when you're kind of like in the privacy of your home, like more
Hmm.
quieter. Um, Everybody is free to come to the office 5 days a week, and some people do, but most people come in on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, and Mondays and Fridays are kind of people work at home.
That's cool. So Ellipsis is your studio. Small studio.
Yep,
How many developers are you guys looking? Around 30 from what I was able to see?
that's exactly it. And
Yeah.
I actually think it's a really good number. The first game I ever worked on, I think we were around 30, and I think it's enough to have keep people in every kind of lane, if you will. And whenever we need a little bit more, there's always outsourcing. And I really do think that the future lies in that kind of combination of either outsourcing or co-dev, but like having a small core team and then complementing with the right people at the right time.
Right. So how do you guys begin the discussion of, this is where our direction is going, this is what we want to make? You guys sit around in a cubicle or a circle in the main office kind of thing and go, hey, what's your idea? What's your idea? And you just kind of pick one. This one is the most appealing. How do you break this down?
Yeah, that's
That's
very
it.
close to
I
it. So
nailed it, Michael.
what we did, exactly. Yeah, what we did is we literally had, I think it started with Mustafa and I. He's the creative director, and we sat down and we each came up with 3 pitches, and we sat around together. We looked at the pitches, and each of us had 2 pitches that we liked, and they were the same, like one from him, one for me. What we did is we complemented it, like we mixed them together. So
Cool.
um, some components come from one of the pitches, other ones come from the other. But what we realized is when we put them together, they were strangely complementary, and they allowed us to. So, for example, this idea of the transformation came from one pitch, but the idea of fighting these giant enemy bosses came from the other pitch. The idea of leveling up in session came from one, but the idea of having these elements in the map, like these kind of growths in the map that kind of create like a modifier to the map, came from the other pitch. So it really, honestly, there's something I didn't talk about. Like I mentioned earlier that we had these. You can build up your build. You can kind of equip these terror seeds. So what you're actually equipping is something we call a bindling, and a bindling is a kind of a voodoo doll. And that you instead of having armor, because you change your form, so you couldn't have that. So what you have is this kind of cosmic entity, this character. It's like a voodoo doll. There's different ones that have different properties, then you can equip stuff on them. So that came from one pitch. And honestly, I find that and then a lot of complementarity came from the people that when we started growing the team, we started 2, then we grew to 5 people. Each of the other ones kind of brought something new to it. So it really did become kind of a group effort. And one thing that I've learned in my experience is that when your core fantasy is strong, so when the why is very clear and strong, most ideas people bring actually land very close to the target, because I think that a lot of mistakes that people make in creating new IP is that they go very bottom up. I like this game, I like that game, this is really cool, and then you kind of experiment, which isn't to say that it isn't a good way. I mean, all ways are good, and depending on the team's DNA, people will prefer one or the other. But I'm a really big fan of the top-down approach, of the kind of the what's the vision, what's the key word, what's that fantasy, and then when you clearly define that, it makes it so much easier, in my opinion, to get everybody to kind of focus in the line.
Was there a moment in development where you were either running a play test or you saw something and it clicked and you went like, this vision that you were talking about, just the two of you, you went, wow, we finally got it? Is there that moment you've had where you're like, this is what I wanted, and I'm glad that we finally, not pen to paper, but sort of, pixels to video?
Yes, we did one, a play test, I think it was last June. And the feedback that we got, like, this is okay. We hope we get this feedback. And weirdly, the playtest, and this is pure coincidence, was in Montreal. And
that's full circle, isn't it?
So we went there, and yeah, we got exactly. And when we knew we were onto something is when people started asking if they could take the posters we had put on the wall home with them.
Nice.
So like, awesome. I think we might be onto something. Yeah, but and there's remember what I mentioned earlier about that whole thing with the sanity, where the more you draw power, the more abilities you use, that when you transform, it kind of costs sanity, and then at one point you kind of turn in. That part happened relatively recently, and it came from, again, 3 different people on the team, or 3 or 4 different people. Literally, we were trying to address something, an issue, and everybody had a different idea. And literally, this is a result of those 4 ideas merging together, and it created something so elegant. It's the kind of thing that when we realized that, could this work? Would it? It can't not be that. It's almost like at one point, the game starts designing itself. You sometimes, very, very rarely, when things line up and that kind of core fantasy is very strong and simple, sometimes you come up with something that would have been very hard. I don't think we could have come up with this idea at the beginning. It almost came up with itself at the right moment,
That's cool. Let's talk about the classes that we're going to be able to get into. There's 3 characters that are kind of taking the starring role right now. How solid are those core characters to the game, and where do we branch out from there?
So these are the first three.
Yeah.
First we have characters, which are like Elena, we have Marcus, we have Jordan. These are purely aesthetic. So they have cool backstories, and these are our Grim Runners, and like we plan on having a lot of them, and we already have about, I would say, 18 that are designed and that have bios and everything. But they don't have any inherent powers. They're like characters in Fortnite, for example, where the characters themselves don't really.
Okay.
It's really up to the character that you kind of think is cool. And then you have the archetypes they can turn into. So each of the characters can turn into any archetype. And when they do transform, the creature they transform into is unique to that visual character, which is part of you might like Elena for playing a seer character, and you might like Jordan better for playing a nameless because you just like the way they look. And you can totally do that. So characters are, again, aesthetic. They don't really have any powers. And then you have the archetypes. We have the Vorbeasts, the Seers, and the Nameless. So each of them has a very strong core fantasy. And they're drawn from mythology and folklore from around the world. What we did a big analysis, and I'm a huge fan of this kind of stuff. I love history, and obviously I worked on Assassin's Creed, so
Yep.
it comes with the territory. But I like history, and I like the underlying patterns that kind of dictate history and mythology. So what we did was a big kind of audit of every single kind of horror creature from folklore from all over the world, and we found patterns. And we distilled these, we put them all into groups, and we distilled what the core fantasy and why this character exists. So, for example, werewolf is a good one. Werewolves exist in almost every culture, and the reason is very obvious. We are human animals. We've built society around us, and we've kind of outgrown the animal, but it's still there. It's still dormant. So the werewolf fantasy comes from, or the werewolf kind of mythology comes from, what happens when that line is crossed. What happens when something breaks and the beast comes out, whether be it because of like a drug or alcohol, or because of circumstances. And so it kind of shows that it's kind of almost like a warning tale for that. Witches are all about nature and the unknown, and about forbidden knowledge. And vampires are another good one. They're found in almost any culture, and they always have to do with something sexual. It's always about, like, they come at night. It's about the unwanted consequences of a sexual encounter. It's a metaphor for disease, but also for the repercussions, and it's stuff like that. So what we did was really try to kind of distill the essence from each of these archetypes when we designed our own. So we now have three. We have the Vorbeasts, which are werewolves. The Seers are, think of them like witches, kind of like warlock type characters. And then we have Nameless, which are very kind of Lovecraftian, like eldritch type creatures, like reality bending, nightmare. Whereas the Seers are about corruption and contamination, and whereas the Vorbeasts are about rage and about melee. So each of these different archetypes plays differently. The Vorbeast, as I was mentioning, the werewolf character is all about like melee combat, and very visceral combat. It's about the senses, tracking, hearing, feeling. The Seer is about ranged combat, and it's kind of it spreads corruption, it spreads doubt, and it can even their locomotion is different. You can unlock, like for the Vorbeast, there's kind of a jumping ability. For the Seer, it can actually fly. And then you have the Nameless. Think of the Nameless like an assassin type character, in the sense that they can warp in and out of reality. They can actually access this kind of a parallel dimension called a Nightmare Deep, where you can actually go through walls, and you can kind of like sneak up behind characters. So these are kind of more high damage strike and then kind of escape type characters. But we'll have many more. Right now we have around, I think it's 9 total archetypes that are designed. and they're all they're all designed kind of like a rock paper scissors kind of asymmetric design. One is strong against one, is weak against another one, and so forth. So there's a level of strategy that you can have when you're playing, where as a team you can kind of try to guess what the other players are going to be playing, and then kind of find complementary groups to kind of counter them.
And you were talking about something earlier when it came down to this game's about choice. And with the extraction genre, it usually right, PvPvE, we know you're going to kill some enemies that are AI, but you want to kill the other teams. Arc Raiders recently has kind of shifted where it's almost like everybody's working together against these sort of AI enemies. Are you guys kind of hoping to go back to that? Yes, we want to kill the bad guys, but you also want to make sure you're the last team standing? Or do you envision a world where maybe the whole lobby kind of gets together and they team up and then they all kind of leave together?
It's a really good question. And when Arc Raiders came out, it actually validated a lot of stuff that we were kind of betting on. Our game was always about, it's not so, we even, since the beginning, we've never referred to it as a PvPvE. We were always even referring it to as a PvEvP. So it was always intended that the world is the biggest threat. Now, you can come in with other teams, and which case, like friendly fire is off, and there's other benefits, like some rewards are shared. But you can team up with other players, like strategically, even if you're not part of the team, but you can even formalize those alliances within the session. So I can go to a statue of Umbra and literally form a team or disband a team during the match, okay? So this idea that of betrayal, of trust, of alliances is really baked into the whole concept. Now, we don't consider ourselves a PvP game. Not that there can't be PvP. Of course there can. But the idea is, and you mentioned earlier, this thing about like about why is it a horror game? That's another element that made this into a horror game. You need to see the PvP almost as an extension of that. Is you're doing your own stuff. There's creatures stalking you. It just happens that some of them might be human. So if you put it that way, then it's not a game about like big brawls. It's a game about stalking and about the creature that might be hiding in the dark. And we literally have pitch black in the map. Like we have like three lighting paths. So lit, penumbra, and pitch darkness. And each has a different level of risk. One exposes you, but you can see, but you're also exposed. The other one is more ambiguous. Shapes that you see are there, because we also have these humans that are kind of like, they're not there yet, but they're being integrated. The kind of humans that have been kind of absorbed by the gloom, so they're kind of like stuck. Some of them are loot containers. Other ones are, because they're humans that are being seeded. Other ones are one stage later, which means that if you get too close, there's eyes that open and they will sound an alarm or release a pestilence. Other ones are already stage 3, so which if you wake them up, they'll literally wake up and attack you. So when you're in the penumbra, which kind is it? When you're in the dark, of course, you need to open. We have this kind of flashlight. It's kind of this magical thing, orb. You have to open it up, but if you do so, other players can see you. If you turn it off, you might not see anything, but other players won't see you either. So imagine going into that dark alley, that pitch dark alley, and just opening your flashlight, and there's a werewolf right there staring at you. That's the kind of situation that we want to create with the game. Another super cool element, which we haven't really talked about a lot yet. So I guess it's the first time I think I'm talking about this. So our game is so I started my career on Far Cry, okay? Far Cry 2. And I'm a big fan of systemic gameplay. And one thing that I find a lot of these multiplayer games or extraction games or many games lack that systemic element that I think is amazing for creating anecdotes and for creating unique player stories. So one thing that we're betting heavily on in the game is creating these systemic ingredients that will allow for the way I can put this is most games are about the destination. You get there, there's a cinematic, you do something. Our game is about the journey. And I'll give you a super concrete example of how this could work. So you're crouching kind of in between cars, and you're kind of like trying to keep quiet. You're playing by yourself, and you see your early game. You're trying to kind of get stuff like loot in order to craft, or do stuff. So you see one of those kind of infected humans, like one of those kind of statues. So you realize it's in the light. You realize that it's a container. So you start and you approach to loot, but you didn't see that the one behind it is actually a second stage. And when you get close and you start making the noise, like to loot, the eyes open up and it ejects this kind of like cloud of like pestilence, these creatures. What you do is your reflexes are sharp, so you just step back, you dodge back, you hit a car, the alarm triggers. Now the alarm triggers, which means that the third stage creatures that are all around start waking up. So what you do is you spot an alley, it's dark, you run into it, but you're careless and you step on glass, which creates noise. And now the kind of this pod, the monster closet thing, starts opening up, and now you're stuck between a monster spawner and these things behind you. So the idea is to create these elements that allow for escalation, and then also give some of these tools to players when they're in the lesser form, the Grim Runner form versus the Grim Spawn form. Like, they can use stuff that will attract or create noise. So this is also something that you can do when you're stalking other players. Imagine you don't even need to attack them. They're in the middle of this forest of potential enemies, and you just throw this thing in there that creates noise, and all of a sudden they're busy fighting these enemies, and then you can kind of pick them off, or you can just run sideways and run to whatever objective they were trying to get and get it for yourself. So that's the kind of game that we're trying to kind of like the dynamic that we're trying to create in the game.
Man, it's I'm so stuck because shit, freaking horror games, I have such a hard time. You guys would have really lost me if it was like Resident Evil realistic, right? But your art direction is enough that I'm gonna be able to go in, get scared shitless, but still be able to play, right? Can you talk about the art direction itself? Because I think it is a little bit unique than what we normally see. You mentioned Fortnite earlier, and I'm not going to say it's Fortnite whatsoever. We've seen a lot of games take that Fortnite formula and kind of iterate on it, or even just kind of almost reuse it in a sense. So you guys, I find, are somewhere in between this Fortnite, but yet not quite the Resident Evil realistic form. What was the choice decision behind there?
Most horror games look very similar, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just, people want to do something realistic because realistic can be very gross, especially if you go into guts and details, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I'm a huge fan of like stuff like Junji Ito, for example, which, like, Japanese horror master. It can be stylized and still scary. And when you're making a game, you have this. You're in a synthetic world. So you have this power to create anything you want. And yet we always go to realistic, right? Movies, sometimes, they expend a lot of energy to try to kind of look stylized, whereas we are doing the opposite. So it was this idea of, if we're creating a rich mythology, if we're creating this cool original world, why not give it an interesting, unique look? And where we went was graphic novel. We tried looking at how a graphic novel kind of is drawn, and can we replicate it? And even like, we haven't really shown, like, at one point we'll probably create videos specifically for this, but when you get close to objects, you literally see the ink. And we use like really inexpensive techniques to kind of achieve this. For example, I don't know if you guys know what a normal map is. It's kind of a layer of texture that you put over a surface that kind of simulates bumps. It will tell light how to behave. And it's usually used for like, details like skin pores or wrinkles, like a wrinkle map when you have characters speaking. Those are normal maps that get blended in. What we did is we added brush strokes to the normal map. So the light, when it hits it as though there were kind of brush strokes. And so the darkness will pool in those areas, and it'll create exactly the same effect that what it looks like when an inker is drawing a kind of a gothic graphic novel with a lot of ink. So, I guess we just wanted to have fun and kind of wanted to get, create a world that felt uniquely Nightholme, that didn't look like any other game,
Yeah.
and that really kind of, I don't know, like manifested the core tenet of the IP kind of in its visual.
How much fun are you having right now?
A lot. I mean, it's
Yeah. It
make
shows.
no mistake, making games is hard, but
Yeah.
you need to have fun or else it's unbearable.
Go ahead, Michael.
I think that's a great segue into, and obviously, you probably don't have the answer, but how do you make it so the player keeps having fun, right? Because everything you said, it's got me hooked, right? I want to check it out, but run 99, run 100. I'm like, okay, this alleyway, I know what to do. So how do you make sure that there's that reason to keep dropping in, right? To keep going back in and not make it so once players kind of figure out, okay, if I go to the light, I got to make sure I look here, that they don't almost just kind of solve the game.
Yep. And it's a really good question. So the first part of the answer is the systemic nature of it. I think that when games are feel very scripted, you go down this alley, the same enemy is going to kind of jump out of the window, and then so this idea that the game allows for like unpredictable encounters is part of the formula. Exploring ingredients, testing out how some ingredients kind of interact with other ones, testing out new strategies. The human aspect also makes it highly replayable because you're playing against other people. And so every match is different depending on who's actually playing. Then we have this idea that the game, this is a premium game. It's not a free-to-play game. But we are planning on having like seasonal updates. And a lot of them are free. So for example, new maps. A new map will, like now that Wraithford, now you have this new map that you're going to have to learn. And the new map, each map is kind of based around one core enemy. So Wraithford is about the Seers. When we release a new map, we'll probably also release a new kind of boss set that is reflective of the type of horror that inhabits that map. And then, releasing new archetypes, new ways to play. Our three archetypes play very differently. You go from melee to range to kind of more like kind of a in and out kind of stealthy killer. Even their locomotion is different to a certain extent. So adding new enemies, like a new map means new AI enemies. And remember, our game is a lot about it's PvE before the VP, which means that the enemies are a big part of the AI enemies are a big part of how the map plays and how the fun that you have. So it's a combination of making the game replayable in its core with the systems, and then still adding kind of surprises like periodically.
How periodically are those surprises going to be dropping once the game is released?
Look, I can't promise anything because we're pre-early access. But right now what we're targeting is maybe like we'd like to have every 4 months something that is tangible. So either kind of either a new archetype or a new map, something that will feel like a substantial kind of like novelty.
That's fair. Do we have a... Sorry, Michael, I'm just going to get one more in there before you get...
Okay, no, go ahead.
I want to keep talking about this. What about the release date? Do we have a release window lined up? Where are you aiming?
What I can tell you is that pretty soon, in maybe a couple of months, we'll be able to give more details on that.
Okay. All right. We'll be hearing from Matt. I see you in the corner. Go ahead, Michael.
That was my question. I was going to see what the the timeline was. So I can pivot here. Because you're obviously going to add more archetypes, but as of right now, let's say when the game launches, you guys just have the 3 archetypes. If someone is hopping in for the first time, but they don't know what to do, Alex, your guide, right? What is your go-to build, right? If you jump in a game right now, if you could hop in, what are you going for? So if you're trying to guide a new player, what would you tell them? Start this way to maybe learn the game best, or maybe the way you have the most fun.
I think that the probably the easiest archetype to start with is the Vorbeast, because it's just kind of it's more resilient and it's a melee attacker, so it's kind of it's more intuitive. Whereas I think the hardest one to play is probably, but it's also I mean, I'm not going to say because they're all equally powerful, but they all are equally powerful for different circumstances. But I think that probably the most challenging one to play at start is probably the Nameless, and the Seer I think is kind of in between. The Seer is actually very powerful because of the ranged attack, but it's also a lot more fragile than the Vorbeast.
That's cool, man. I'm pretty excited about this game. There's so I said like the horror thing is definitely not one for Michael and I, but it's one I just keep kind of getting pulled into the more and more I see. I went back watched some of your dev diaries as well. You guys are talking about being more open than your usual studio. What does that do to build your community, and what's the player feedback like?
Yep. I think people are very appreciative of it, and you know, the video that the latest one that we published is actually a pre-alpha build. Most studios, except for very small indies, they would never do anything like that. But we actually embrace it. I think you know, a lot of players are very hard on devs, and I think that when that happens, I think that we also have to look at ourselves, the devs, why that is. And I think that for a long time, we've kind of projected this kind of like it's about overselling, right? And it's about like it's the best thing ever, and then you know reality hits, and then fans get disappointed. And we have very passionate fans, passionate people, especially when you set them up very high and they fall from very high. They can get very mad because of you know they literally love this stuff. So
Yeah.
I think that it's not a bad thing to show people how hard it is to make a game and to show how much a game can evolve from its inception to the actual game that people get to play, and the hard decisions that have to be made. I can already tell you that there's stuff that we've showed in some of our early videos that will not be in the game. It's changed, it's evolved, but that's fine. I think it happens all the time. People just don't know about it, right? And so yeah, it's just a philosophy that we kind of decided to embrace. Everybody says community first, but what does that mean? For us, what it means is be open, be transparent, answer every question truthfully. If somebody asks a question, even if it's something that where, yeah, you're right, we screwed up, like we will say it because it happens all the time. Like the important thing is how do you kind of address it then and fix it?
When is
For
go ahead, Michael.
someone like me, I gotta ask. For someone like me, who you know, I was on the fence, like Drew said. You've hooked me. What's the best way to stay up to date on these dev vlogs, on this footage? Is it just wishlist on Steam and open it every day and see if you guys posted something? Is there a social media account? Like, what's the best way to keep following Nightholme until you guys do release the game so that we're always up to date?
Well, the first thing is yes, wishlist, please, because we're a small studio and that matters a lot. You know, I'd rather us have a smaller play count at the beginning, but people that really care about the game and that have followed us and that really like get what we're doing, than have like this huge buzz and have all these people like get into the game and then afterwards lose interest. But wish list and then go on Discord so that you become part of the family and that you become part of the community that we're building. That kind of like, of course we post stuff on Steam, but honestly, Discord is the best place to ask questions. And we not only do we have kind of regular posts about the game, about how to play the game, but we even have this amazing writer that I've worked with in the past. Her name is Jessica, and she writes these amazing stories that you guys can read for free, like on the Discord. And she's actually a very I discovered her years ago on No Sleep on the subreddit, and we became close collaborators. And now like she's part of the people that are building the IP in the world. And if you want to read her stuff, come to the Discord.
That's cool. Is there a narrative within the world, or is it more of just going out and experiencing the gameplay?
You know, it's not a story game, so there's no cinematics and story, but it's a very rich IP, very rich universe, and there's a lot of stories that are embedded and baked into the game. Also, you know, remember I mentioned this. We have one core mission is to go into the world and beat the Gloom Fiend, but there's actually many different objectives. You could go into the game and not even go after the Gloom Fiend. There's quests, there's contracts, You can go into the world with specific objectives, and those missions, the way we're designing them, they're procedural. So we are creating a tool that allows us to kind of create these missions inside the world, so that the mission that you're like, let's say we both have the, I don't know, go find the lost tome of whatever, and all three of us have that mission. It will be different for each of us, and so if we're all streaming, that it's going to be a completely different experience. One could be easier than the other. And so a lot of these missions also have associated lore with them. So collectibles, recordings. So we can tell you the story through your discovery and exploration of the world, not necessarily through cinematics.
That works for me. I like that idea. Yeah, that's cool. Michael, you spinning over there?
I mean, I do. We asked this to all the developers we have on, and I think it's a fun one. It changes it a little bit, Alex. And look, I'm sure you could answer Nightholme if you really could. But what else do you play, right? You know, you sound like a very passionate guy. Like, what other games have you piqued your interest? Either maybe what's your favorite game? Just what else do you do besides Nightholme? Because I mean, this sounds like a great game, but I kind of want to know a little bit more about you.
I'm a huge fan of Elden Ring.
Okay.
I love
Okay.
I had not played Bloodborne, and then I decided to play it. I finished it about a couple of months ago. Now I'm playing those procedural kind of dungeons that they have in it. I love it. I play Arc Raiders. I just got Starflight on the PS5. No, not Starflight. The Bethesda game.
Starfield.
Starfield. Yeah.
Starfield.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Starfield. That's an old
That's
one.
Close enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. We know what you were talking about.
I had never played it, so I decided to give it a try. So I'm playing it right now. I also play some indie games.
What do you think, Starfield?
I enjoy it.
Yeah.
I enjoy it. I think it's a great game. And I'm a Bethesda fan. I love the Scrolls games. I love the Fallout games. This one I think got flack for, you know, I only played it now. I can only say that now it's a fantastic game.
Sure.
Mouthwashing I'm playing. It's a small indie game.
Okay.
My daughter is 14 and she loves horror games, and so all the indie horror games, she's the one that says you have to play this, and so I follow her recommendations, and I have like a list of I have a Steam Deck, and I have a list of small indie games that I play. Yeah, I love playing games. Like I play I'm a bit busy, but every time I have a bit of time, I play.
How often are you able to actually finish a game because you are so busy developing your own?
I have to finish it, like especially
Okay.
especially the Elden Ring and anything that's done by FromSoft. I like to finish.
Fair enough. I want to talk about the state of the industry real quick, because you guys are new studio, you're a new IP coming out of nowhere. How do you make sure you guys hit the spotlight in the right form when you see the competition out there? Just even a AAA studio is hitting with layoffs one day after the next. Like we covered all the time on the website, right? It's almost to the point where we're exhausted. This is not something I want to do when I talk about you guys, nor anybody else in that matter. So what do you do to make sure that you guys don't land in that position?
I think that the industry has changed a lot, and I think that that gone are the days of very big studios and very ambitious games that are kind of not almost an afterthought. Like it's the thing to do, right? People didn't even question it anymore. I think the industry is in good shape. I think that more people are playing games. I think the problem comes from two different things. Number one, back catalogs are a hell of a lot more appealing than they were back in the day. So if I'm going to play the remake of something, that remake might be better be better than the original, or else I can just buy the original for less money and then play that one if I hadn't played it. But also, I think that I've never heard this discussed, and maybe somebody, there's been people that have talked about this or it's documented, but this is something that I myself have never seen written out there, but it's my belief. We went from an industry that was a niche industry. Like I grew up playing games. I was a geek, so still am. But now games are not about, but games now are mainstream. And what happens when you have immature industry where something is niche And when it's in a transitional period from niche to mainstream, there's a parabolic curve that happens. This is what happened these last 20 years. The video game industry was in a parabolic expansion, which means that of course there's still some flops, but it's much harder to have a flop when the industry itself is propelling you upwards. We've reached maturity now, so now we no longer have the benefit of that parabolic rise. Now
Right.
it's more about maintaining and about steady growth. So what we're seeing now is kind of, in my opinion, it's kind of a readjustment because of that, and especially COVID didn't help because it exacerbated that even more, right? And it created kind of a already unreasonable expectation to an unreasonable expectation. And so I think that it's a lot of that we're seeing. So to answer your question directly, I think that how we're doing is we can only do the best we can. And the best we can means be mindful of how much the game costs. Have it be cheap enough so that we can experiment and have fun without having the unbearable pressure of, $200 million on your shoulders of, if we do something unproven, will it work? A small team, more agile, more maneuverable, a passionate team, which means that people can focus on making the game, not anything else. And then thirdly, I think it's about following our gut. I think one thing that we've learned in the past couple of years is that the fan base reacts to passion projects. If you believe in something, if you're doing something that you truly love and the quality is there, people will at least notice. And at least that's the bet. And that kind of bridges in with the community first approach that I was mentioning earlier. I think it's all about community. It's not about I don't think it's realistic anymore to go like, oh, we're going to be the game that has, that sells 20 million copies. I think that the industry has become more fragmented, and it's more about finding your village, finding your people. So if this game can speak very strongly to a reasonable amount of people that are passionate about the game, then that's how we find success in this day and age. And if the cost isn't astronomical, then you can consider that a success. It doesn't have to be the next Minecraft.
That's fair. You talk about the price. Obviously, we're not going to hear about the price today, but how mindful is that when you are talking about, okay, we're going to release our game? We see a lot of games come out around the $40 price range now, compared to over here in Canada, the $80, right? It's such a easy point of entry, I guess I would say, at the $40, and going and betting it in $80 and going, man, this didn't work. I just lost $80.
Yep. No, it's going to be a more reasonable, cheaper price point, and that's the whole point. It's we don't have to sell the game for $80.
Sure.
And I agree with you. I'd rather buy, unless I'm really, it's a game that I'm expecting, and it's a game that I've been looking forward to. Like, I'd rather buy 3 or 4 smaller games than kind of investing on something that I'm not too sure about, and unless it's been vetted by the audience, and like, our friends of mine have played and said, no, this is great, you'll love it.
Yeah.
But I think that that's also the part of the answer. The reason that we don't want to go free to play also is that because one could argue, well, that free is better, but I think that puts a lot of pressure on monetization and on making it profitable. And a lot of times, games that I think would actually have had a chance, had they been kind of less aggressive in the monetization, kind of die because of it. But at the same time, when you put yourself in the position of the people that have financed the game, like, you need to kind of like start generating money. So
Sure.
I think that the free to play is a hard one to kind of manage. So I think a lower price point is kind of the perfect sweet spot for everybody.
Is that a one-time purchase then, or are we getting into other monetization, customization options that will be a storefront in the game?
I mean, there's going to be other stuff that you can buy in the game, but it's never going to be pay to win or mandatory. And again, like, as I was mentioning a bit earlier, our philosophy is to give stuff for free. Like, if you have a new map, the worst thing you can do is sell that, because then if the 3 of us haven't bought it, we can no longer play together. So we're being very mindful in the way that we expand the game, so that the expansion feels like a reward to people that have already invested in the game, not like a barrier to people that to punish people and have them, have to spend more money.
That was the case with going back to your old studio over in Montreal. It was when Brotherhood came out with multiplayer for Assassin's Creed. They actually made certain people, you have to buy the map, but then it just segregated the audience, right? And then you just lose your install base. So
I agree. It's that strategy. Yeah.
Speaking of the state of the industry, right? You're working on a game that's coming out hopefully this year. Pardon the pun, but there is that horror lurking in November, right? The GTA 6. If you're not Take-Two, it's a horror for everybody. Does that worry you at all, or is it head down? We're going to finish our game because horror community isn't quite the same. We're going to make sure we hit our village, and if it comes out in November, it comes out in November. How much do you handle maybe one of the biggest games ever releasing in the same year you want to release your title?
Yeah, I mean it's a hard one. I do think our audience is different. That being said, a black hole is a black hole. It's got infinite mass and it will absorb everything. So I think that anybody that says with a straight face that they're going to ignore GTA 6, I think is probably lying through their teeth. I think that we, of course we are paying very close attention to, are they going to move it again? I don't think so personally. I think it's this is the time that the date is set. So of course we're being mindful of that kind of that big black hole centered in November.
Yeah, without a doubt. Before we wrap this up, what's your favorite part right now about Nightholme?
I think my favorite part is the sanity, the way that it now works. I think it's such an elegant, I'll tell you a story of why this is my answer. It's very difficult to achieve this in an actual in a game where we have this kind of the frontal cortex, which is kind of our like human brain, and then we have this primitive kind of more reptilian brain. When you're able to create a dissonance between those two parts within a game, you're onto something. So picture this. You're playing and your sanity is really low, but you're trying to survive. And at that wrong moment, you use an ability, you lose sanity, you become that abomination thing. So your human brain is going, oh crap, now I have 5 minutes to go and find and hunt another player, get their heart, consume it, or all of the stuff that I have equipped, I'm going to lose it if I lose the match. Like I have a build and I have these really rare items that I've equipped, now I can lose them. Crap. At the same time, your reptilian is going like, oh man, because now you're this huge thing that can just rip everything apart. So which one is it? Is it crap or is it
let's go,
or a little bit of both? Which is so that's why I like that system, because it puts players in a strange place, and that's what we're trying to do with the game.
That's fair. It's very fair. It's a 3-player or solo. Why 3 players? I'd like to thank Apex first of all for introducing this. Seems like, anyways, that's where it seems to stem from, right? And all of a sudden now a lot of games have followed that format. Why that? Why was that your decision?
You could be solo, 2 players, or 3 players.
Right.
We capped it at 3 because I think it's still small enough to be manageable, especially when you think that when you have a stealth game. We are an action stealth game, but there's stealth elements. And having worked on a co-op stealth game, I can tell you that contrary to action, where the more people, the more powerful. When you're playing stealth, the more people, the more likely one ends up being spotted, and then you go like, what the hell, man?
Yeah.
And so 3 is a really good number where you can still manage. And we have a more permissive game. We don't have a heart failure stealth game. It's much more dynamic and systemic. But 3 felt like a really good number. There's also another element that I haven't mentioned that we're adding to the game that actually adds to that dynamic is we want to have chat that is proximity. So literally, you need to whisper or people will hear you. Or if you yell, maybe somebody will hear you further away, but you've just broadcast your position. So also having 3 players is again, it's a perfect sweet spot for having that communication, not having like too many people to manage around the map. And of course, people can split up and
Sure.
you know, rejoin.
Man, that's cool. Oh, that's so cool. I'm so excited. I really am.
Yeah.
Huh, man,
Yeah.
I'm pretty pumped. Alex, can you tease one archetype before we go? The next?
One new archetype?
Yeah. Can you tease us?
Sure, I can. You know, when we looked at various cultures and various kind of legends and myths for folkloric enemies, we also looked at religion. And so there's archetypical creatures that are also found in most religions that are super cool. Like I don't think you have to think too hard to think that there's usually duality and these like opposing forces, and think about what that could look like. Those things could look like under a horror light.
Okay. Okay. I like it. I like it. Michael, anything before we go?
No, I'm pumped for this game. I love your passion, Alex. You and I talked. We were like, horror game. Like, I'm not a horror guy, and now as soon as this is done, I'm making sure the wish list on Steam is there because you've got me pumped up for this game. So I'm really excited.
Alex,
man, thanks.
Dude, thank you so much. Is there anything you want to say to everybody before we take off?
No, I like wish list, and I really hope you enjoy.
Excellent. Alex, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today about Nightholme. We obviously are pretty pumped over here. The game looks incredible and is only pre-alpha of what we've seen, so we can hardly wait to see what comes next. But until next time, everybody, I'm Drew. That's Michael. We'll see you next week at Theory Unlocked.